Welcome along to a very special edition of Film Talk, where I'm joined by the wonderful Morris Bright MBE, film historian and author, so that we can pay tribute to one of the greatest actresses of our generation, the wonderful Dame Barbara Windsor. Morris, welcome to the programme. And Barbara was a very close friend of yours, wasn't she?
Yeah, I first met Barbara back in, I think it was about 1994. And we remained in contact after then. We met up on several occasions. She was very kind to me early on in my career, very supportive, and we can come and talk about that a bit later on. And we just remained friends. And this industry is a funny one. You don't always necessarily see people sort of every month or every year, but when you do see them, it's just like old times. And as I've said, she became a friend. I was very honoured to become a friend of hers and her husband, Scott. Shared some very happy times with her, some funny times as well. And it's a great, it's a privilege to be able to look back at her life today following the sad news of her passing.
How do I look?
Oh, smashing, yeah, you look ever so nice.
Good.
Will you help me on with mine, please?
Of course, yes. Huh? You'd better just put it in your handbag, Daphne. All right, men, if you're ready.
She's known for Carry On. She's known for other films too, like Sparrows Can't Sing, and more recently Alice in Wonderland, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. A tremendous film career, but also great on TV through EastEnders. She's always been a part of our lives. She's such an important part of popular culture. What is it about Barbara you think that makes her so significant?
I think it's because she's only 4'11", but she always had this energy and this larger than life persona. But it was real. And so what you saw on screen and what you saw in real life on screen was a version of it. Of course, she was an actress, and a very fine actress, and she trained to be one. But when people met her and got to see Barbara, they realized she was actually one of the nicest, kindest people you could meet. So this bubbly character was absolutely who she was. She was very honest. She was very down to earth. She would say things exactly as they were and sometimes use the most interesting of language. But that's what people liked about her. She was honest, and she was real, and she was kind, and she was always interested in the people that were visiting or wanted to sign an autograph, etc. So it wasn't just this screen persona with people seeing her on stage. People loved her as much off screen as they did on. And not everyone, and you can't say that about every performer.
But she started her film career, we all know her for Carry On. I think her first Carry On was Carry On Spying, wasn't it, in 1964? But her film career goes back at least 10 years before that. Wasn't she in The Bells of St. Trinian's, one of the schoolgirls?
Yeah, one of her very early appearances. I think it was her first appearance in film was in The Bells of St. Trinian's, and she had to sort of lean out the window and do like a bit of a gall blimey governor line, Cockney line. And her mother was very distressed, saying, I've spent all this money, and, they didn't have a lot, and saved up to send her to Ada Foster's. I've spent all this money for the last so many years getting you to speak proper. And your very first film party, so do that gall blimey, that kind of stuff. And I think that we must be very careful that whilst we all adore the Carry-Ons, and I do, and I've very happily written books about them, you've got to understand that of the 31, she did 9. So she was there for quite a lot of them, a third of them. But I think that for people just to think of her career as only being about Carry On, and possibly later on EastEnders, does her a bit of an injustice. And for a while, it was a bit of a chain around her neck, because after the films finished and after she stopped doing the Carry-Ons in, I think, 1974. So she'd started in 64 with Spying, but then she was expected to go on to do Carry On Cleo as Cleopatra, but she couldn't do because she was on Broadway. And she went to 2.5 years on Broadway, and Oh, What a Lovely War. So I think Amanda Barry, her good friend, took over the role of Cleopatra. And then she came back in the mid to late 60s and ran up with the films until 1974. But it became a bit of a chain, because that bubbly, slightly busty, slightly cheeky persona followed her around. The films were then being shown on television. Huge ratings. So Carry On Abroad, which she was one of the major players when it was shown, I think, in 1978, 18.5 million people. And the films were being shown regularly. And then the producers and directors re-edited them down into these half-hour clip programs, these compilations they used to put on just after Coronation Street. So you got another 15 million people watching it. And some of the casting people are looking around and seeing Barbara Windsor, but this is the character that they're still seeing. So it was hard for her for a while to get big and small screen roles. because of the character that people tended to associate with her in the Carry-Ons. And I think for a while that frustrated her. And in fact, I know it frustrated her, particularly because of the fact that the women in the films got paid so much less than the men. I mean, it's a story which is still being told to a certain extent, but thankfully a lot less nowadays. But in those days, the men would get, to Sid and Kenneth would get about £5,000 a film, and the women would get, Hattie and Joan and her would get £2,500. But to make it even worse, in some films, if they didn't have a huge role in it, they get a daily rate of like 80 quid a day. And so when they didn't make any money on them being broadcast on television, and when they don't make any money on them on VHS, as it was, on video, and the compilation programs and DVDs, and then it becomes a little bit difficult to get work as a consequence of it, it's understandable that some of the actors, and I know that Barbara was one of them, got frustrated for a while. But then, of course, EastEnders came along about 1994 and took that character, if you like, and expanded it to be this matriarchal character that could be very funny, could be very sweet, but my goodness, what an extraordinary, powerful character she became as Peggy Mitchell, and played some of the most amazing, dramatic storylines with the cancer, the breast cancer, and so on. And it was very, very effective, particularly because she was known as this busty, bubbly character, you know, the bra flying off, etc., bikini flying off and Carry On Capping, and she's dealing with a very serious subject 25 years later, 30 years later, with breast cancer. And it was like it came full circle. People actually got an opportunity in this generation just to see what a great actress she really was. And I think that's really important, because I wouldn't want her just to remember for the Carry-Ons. I love the Carry-Ons, but I think her career, which was, goodness me, it was almost 70 years. I mean, she was 83 and she was acting until just a very short time ago from when she was a child. And it was just a short part of it. And we have a legacy now that we can watch on screen, all sorts of films and performances. And when you look back, you'll see this bubbly ball of energy, really doing what she did best. And that was being on screen and being on stage. And
when she was surprised by Michael Aspel for This Is Your Life, she says, Michael, you can't do my life. It's been too naughty. She kind of recognised the fact that she wasn't that squeaky clean. And in many ways, I think that's kind of what endeared her to the public too. She was genuine and down to earth and real. And
that's exactly it. It's because she was genuine and real, and because people could identify, because people in glass houses and all that, you know, we've all got skeletons in the cupboard. I think someone once said, if you haven't got any skeletons in the cupboard, you must have led a very boring life. And she did not lead a very boring life at all. And she was prepared to put her hand up to it, mea culpa, and say, yeah, you know, yeah, this is the life that I've led. It was tough as a consequence of various operations she had early on. She was unable to have children, and that was a great sadness to her. Her association and friendship with the Krays, the sort of the well-known 60s gangsters, that was well documented. Her relationship and her marriage difficulties early on, and investing in a business like a pub up in I think it was Amersham, which didn't go right. So she didn't always, as you might imagine when you see people on screen, have a very successful life outside of what she was doing. And I think the fact that she was so honest about it is what endeared her to people. And the fact that she was able to get through it and come through it the other side, still laughing and still smiling and still being kind to people, not shutting herself away, was very much what endeared her to people. And I was so pleased when she became a dame, when they gave her a dame, because, you know, we tend to, when it comes to the honours list, it can be a bit snobbish. That the knights of the realm and the dames, etc., tended to be the actors and actresses who spoke like this and performed like this and did all that kind of stuff. Well, Barbara wasn't like that at all. And the very fact that she was recognised for her charity work, in fairness, as much as her career on stage and screen, was wonderful, because it's good to see that anyone can get to the top. You don't have to have had the most perfect of lives. We all make mistakes and we can all learn from them. And it made her who she was, which was an incredibly much loved and adored person, both on screen and off. And I can tell you, I was running a charity event at Pinewood Studios, I think it was 1998. And she said to me, look, Morris, I'm going to have to go at 4 o'clock because I've got to be somewhere and I've got to get into London. I said, fine, your car will be ready. Not a problem at all. About 3:45, rather a long queue of people had gathered and was speaking to her, wanted to see her, take pictures before the days of selfies with cameras and autographs. I said, do you want me just to politely, you know, push them to one side and let you go? She said, Morris, these people have come to see me. She said, Kenny Williams, he would have done that. It was, thank you very much, and walked off. And I always used to tell Kenny, they are people. You know, these are the people that keep us in work. And she said, no, I'm going to stay here. And she stayed there. She signed every autograph, every picture she had taken, a conversation with every person that wanted to have a chat, and she left at 10 to 6. And she was supposed to have left at 4 to be in London by about 4:45. That's the sort of person that she was. She wouldn't say no to people. She would speak with people. And she did that right up until she was no longer meeting them in those circumstances because the Alzheimer's had taken over.
There was a drama about her and her relationship with Sid James, wasn't there? And that was dramatised on the BBC, which kind of showed, I thought, a very different, almost a slightly more subdued, saddened character. You see the bubbly character on film, but that was very earthy, that drama. Was that an accurate representation, or are we just kind of dramatising for the sake of getting ratings?
Well, of course, there were two sort of dramatisations. One was about the carry-ons called Call Blimey, which ITV ran in the late 1990s. And there was more of a drama about Barbara's own life called Babs, which was just a couple of years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago now, on the BBC. And as we've recently heard the whole discussion around The Crown and people saying, shouldn't you have some sentence or two at the beginning that says certain scenes have been dramatised or for dramatic effect, etc. What we're not watching when we watch these things are documentaries. You're watching dramas about people's lives. And I think people need to remember that. In the case of the first one, which was about the carry-ons called Call Blimey, that was very difficult because there was a bit of dramatic license used. And if you watched it, there was an implication at the end that Sid James died of a broken heart because of the end of his brief relationship with Barbara Windsor, when in fact they had stopped seeing each other 2 years before he died. And he passed away after an air spray freshener was used as a prop in a fast he was doing, first night of a fast, and he happened to breathe it in and it brought on a heart attack. He'd had heart attacks before. So again, that upset a few people, and as it would do, because it wasn't an accurate representation. I think the BBC drama was far more accurate. There was more input. There was from Barbara and her family, and I believe Scott, her husband, as well. And so I think if you want to look at more of her life, then that's the one you want to look at from a dramatic point of view and an accuracy point of view. It's called Babs. But I do think that, again, we do have to understand these things are drama. They're not necessarily documentaries. And I don't think necessarily that Barbara would have wanted an entirely documentary type film made about her life. I think she was quite happy saying, I've told everyone about my life. And I'm honoured that people want to turn this into a drama, because how many people are actually known by just a few letters or their first name? Babs, maybe Boris, I suppose. But how many? And how many would have a drama about their life while they're still alive? And so I think she thought that was a great honour and an opportunity, if you like, to perhaps put the record straight about one or two things too. And I thought it was a very kind tribute, and it was well received.
Now, you got to know her later in life, over the last few years in particular. And tell us a little bit about her as a person off screen. I mean, some people, as we've said before, are always on, and others are more relaxed. Tell us about the real Barbara, the Barbara you knew and got to know as a close friend.
She was lovely. She was very kind. And as I've said before, what you saw was what you got. And as I said, she said it as it is. If she thought you were talking nonsense, because very often when you're with a celebrity or with an actor or something, you people have this tendency to fawn a little bit. And, you know, she wasn't having any of that. You were with her. She wanted you to be completely natural. And there was one great thing that happened to us. It was 1994. And it was, I think, the first time I actually met her properly and got to know her a little better than perhaps you would have imagined. Because what happened was I was involved with a plaque event, an unveiling of a plaque to the late Kenneth Williams. And Barbara and Kenneth were very close friends. Kenneth went on her honeymoon when she got married to Ronnie Knight. Yes, Kenneth and his mother went along. It's well documented. And they remained friends for the rest of his life. And he passed away in 1988. So in 1994, we're doing this plaque unveiling on what used to be his flat in Osnaburg Street, down near Great Portland Street. And we went into the flat, which was interesting because Kenneth Williams wasn't someone who liked people to go to his flat. And we looked at where the plaque had been positioned, and there was her, and there was me, and there was Norman Wisdom. And Norman and Barbara needed to look out the window because the press were downstairs looking upwards, and they wanted to take this shot. The only way they could get this shot was for Norman to stand on the toilet and put one foot on the sink, and Barbara to stand on the bath and put one foot on the sink, and they both lean out of these windows. In order for them to be able to do that without moving about and without falling off, You know, I was on the floor, me, Morris Bright, my biggest heroes, Kenneth Williams, Norman Wisdom and Barbara. I'm on the floor on my knees with one hand, my left hand, I think it was, one hand on Norman Wisdom's bottom, right, and my other hand on Barbara Windsor's bottom to keep them steady. And I thought to myself, life is never going to get better than this. And it was great. We had a great day that day. And she signed, I had a copy of her biography that just came out, and she signed it that day in Kenneth Williams' flat. It was odd being there. And she said she found it odd as well. But it was just one of those happy occasions where you just think, you put everything to one side, you do what you got to do to get the picture. And it just stayed with me for always. It was just such a happy and funny occasion.
Now, she's been to a number of your events over the years as well, hasn't she? And wasn't there a celebration at Elstree a few years later?
Well, first of all, there was the 40th anniversary of the Carry-Ons, which was in 1998. And I was involved with an ITV documentary. I was asked to be the consultant for a documentary on ITV to talk about 40 years of Carry-Ons. And there was going to be this big event at Pinewood Studios as well, which is where all the 31 films were made. The director picks up the phone and he says to me, Morris, we've got a problem. I said, what's that? He said, Barbara Windsor won't do the documentary. I said, well, why not? He said, because she's just done one for Channel 4. And she says, enough's enough. Again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about there's only so much she wants to do about Carry On. I completely got that. She was doing EastEnders. But you can't do the Carry On story without doing Barbara Windsor. He said, will you speak to her? So I went, okay. I'll give it a try, but I can't promise. So anyway, I picked up the phone. I said, Barbara, I need to ask you a favour. She said, what's that? I said, I know you said no to this documentary, but I need you to do it. She said, I don't want to do any more documentaries about that Carry On. So I said, look, please. I said, Leslie Phillips is doing it. Joan Sims is doing it. And Joan hadn't done anything for years documentary-wise. June Whitfield. I said, how can we have 40th anniversary celebration and a documentary without you? She said, on two conditions. She said, what's that? She said, you live nearby. And I did. I lived across the road near BBC Elstree where EastEnders was being filmed. She said, you live nearby. I said, okay, yeah, I do. She said, you pick me up and take me to Pinewood. I said, but I've only got a clap, that old Astra. I said, wouldn't you rather have a cab or limousine? She said, Morris, you pick me up in your Astra and you take me to Pinewood. I said, okay, what's the second? She said, the second thing is you have to do the interview. You know me. You know my life. You know my career. You have to do it. I said, I'll get back to you. So I picked up the phone to the director. He's a well-known director, directed Hammer horror films, well-known. He directed The Saint and The Avengers. I said, John, two things. Firstly, she says, can I pick her up in my car? He said, well, that's all right. I'll save us a few quid. He said, you can claim for the petrol. I said, thank you. I said, what's the second thing? He said, the second thing I said is that she wants me to actually do the interview. And I paused because the director, you know, and I thought, what's going to happen? And he turned around and said to me, yeah, okay. You can do the interview. So I turned up at the EastEnders backlot with my card. Security gave me some very dodgy looks, saying, who are you? I've come to pick up Barbara Windsor. Oh, yes. Put me over to the side, checked the car over, picked her up. We had a great laugh. We went there and we did the interview at Pinewood, and it was a really lovely interview. And what was so lovely was that afterwards, the director turned around and said to me, you know what, Morris? I want you to do all the interviews. He said, I'll sit behind you. He said, I've got any notes, I'll pass them on to you. He said, but do that. What you do with Barbara today, do it with the others. So I got to sit on the stage of the Palladium with Jim Dale, interview Leslie Phillips, interview June Whitfield, Joan Sims, all of whom became friends as a consequence. And that was through the kindness of Barbara, who could have said, no, I'm not doing it, or send me a limo and I'll do it and come back. But that's not who she was. And I've always remembered that because it was early on in my career, and it really helped me when people saw the sorts of stuff that I could do as a consequence. And I'll never forget her kindness for that. And then years later, we were able to put up a plaque at Elstree Studios. And this was in 2008. And we had all sorts of wonderful people turn up. So we had Jeremy Summers, who was a film director who directed her on more than one occasion. And we had her EastEnders friends. Stanley Baxter turned up. Dale Winton was there. Victor Spinetti, all sorts of wonderful people. And an opportunity for us at the studios to be able to pay tribute. Her husband, Scott, was there. And again, very proud to be able to introduce her. But it was just such a lovely day. And you could just see the way she spoke with all the audience. And she was there for them. She was with them. That it was never them and us with her. It's always us together. And so I've had some lovely times with her, as many other people have, and been there when there's been an opportunity to pay tribute to her. She's very modest and always wanted other people to take credit. And it was just lovely to be able to turn around and say, Barbara, thank you for the joy you brought us, and see what the reaction is, because I think she fed off that. I think she loved the reaction of people, and she just had time for everyone.
For somebody who was so wonderful, loved by the public, loved by her colleagues, to then, I think, in 2014, be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which is in itself a horrible, terrible, dreadful disease, as anyone whose family members have experienced that will know firsthand. It must have been a terrible crisis for her and Scott to kind of come to terms with that and live with that, I think, for 4 years before announcing it publicly. But she kind of fought through all that and even took it on head on and got involved in awareness and fundraising. You know, she became part of the fight for Alzheimer's too, didn't she?
And I think that will be part of her legacy. Barbara Windsor's legacy won't just be the joy she brought on the screen to us and the stage, for those who remember that, or for the radio, big screen, little screen, the fun and the tears. It will be that in her latter years, when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that her and with her husband Scott, the most lovely of people, who had met her, he was much younger than her, but he had met her, I think, in the early 90s. They got married in 2000, and they've been married for 20 years. And as this illness progressed, they were doing as much as they can to raise awareness, because it is a true fact that when there's a major issue or crisis or illness or something in this world, it takes people who you know and who you can collectively join with to say, let's see what we can do. Can we do more research? Can we do something to cure these illnesses? Because, you know, it's the most cruel of illnesses. I mean, they all are, but Alzheimer's particularly, someone who by the end doesn't remember who they are, who their husband is or wife is, depending on who it is, and doesn't remember the great joy they brought, the performances on the screen, etc. I saw it with Norman Wisdom, and it's heartbreaking because they brought all that joy, and you want them to go out on a high thinking, this is what you did, and they don't actually remember it anymore. So that will be her legacy as well, that she brought this awareness, and through the fundraising and through her husband Scott. There's a great saying which says, no one is forgotten until their name is spoken for the last time. And I have no doubt that Barbara Windsor, through her work and through her performances and through the joy she brought and through the awareness that she brought to the Alzheimer's, she'll never be forgotten. And I think it's very brave what they've done. And also Scott was very wise and very sensible. He would not let her go out when he felt that. So for example, I invited her to an event at the studios a few years back. So Scott, her husband, got in touch with me and said, look, Morris, Barbara would love to be there. And it's not that she doesn't want to be there, but she can't. And he said, I'm going to explain to you why. We've not made this public yet, but we want to control her public appearances now because she's got Alzheimer's, and he explained to me. And I said, I completely understand that. And I completely understood why he wanted to do that, so that any time afterwards that she was out in public, it was in a controlled environment. And so it wouldn't put her under any pressure. She wouldn't forget anything, etc., and so on. So I completely got that. So I knew about that a few years ago. And as I've said, it's when a husband or a wife, a partner becomes a carer, and he couldn't have looked after any better. And he was heartbroken when some months ago he had to say, look, I can't do this anymore in the family home. She needs to be looked after 24 hours a day with nursing and medical care, and they had to move her out of their place in London. But as I say, no one could have been more attentive.
And finally, Morris, tell us, how do you think Barbara would like to be remembered?
Funny, isn't it? She was BAFTA nominated for an early film in the 1960s. She was on a big screen and she was on the small screen. She played iconic characters. She won lots of awards. She was highly regarded in the industry. We all know she could act. And yet I think she would probably want to be remembered as just being someone who was honest and kind, because that's exactly what she was. And in an industry which isn't necessarily always known for its honesty and its kindness, she shone above many others. She was a small bundle of joy, a great friend to have, a great person to have on your side. She would never betray you. She was very kind, and she was adored by the fans and the nation. The word institution is often bandied about, but in this case it was true. Barbara Windsor, Dame Barbara Windsor, was an institution. She leaves a great legacy for us to enjoy on screen. And for those of us who knew her as a friend, it was an honour and a privilege. I mourn her loss, but I will always remember her with a smile.
So whether you're into the latest releases or prefer to go behind the scenes with some of our greatest filmmakers, please do subscribe to our channel. We post new videos every week, so there's always plenty to see. Here's a couple more from Rabbit and Snail that you might want to check out. Thanks for watching. See you next time.